The Galactic Council chamber was an architectural monstrosity, equal parts grotesque and grandiose. Like someone had given a particularly ambitious octopus a limitless budget and a grudge against symmetry. Massive columns twisted toward the vaulted ceiling, their organic shapes pulsing slightly, as if the room itself was alive. Rows of alien dignitaries filled the stands, their gelatinous, scaled, or chitinous bodies packed together in self-righteous indignation. And in the center, on a raised platform designed for grand declarations and public shame, stood 6 human children. They were small, pale things, clearly terrified, but attempting bravery in the face of overwhelming absurdity. One of them, a freckled boy with untied shoelaces, clutched a crumpled chocolate bar as if it were a weapon. Another, a curly-haired girl, scowled at the towering insectoid judge like he was just another mean substitute teacher. The rest simply stared out at the sea of alien faces, eyes wide, not fully comprehending what was happening. A figure stepped forward, adjusting the sash of office draped over its many shoulders. High Arbiter Zilvatak, a creature that resembled a bipedal anglerfish dressed for a particularly boring opera, raised its gavel, a grotesque thing fashioned from the femur of some long-extinct species. The accused stand before this council, guilty of crimes against the interstellar order, Zilvatak intoned, its bioluminescent lure flickering with self-importance. These human offspring, these dangerous, chaotic anomalies were caught playing. A murmur rippled through the assembled aliens. A sentient gas cloud let out a scandalized hiss. A 3-eyed reptilian from the Crack's dominion covered its youngest hatchling's ears. The human ambassador, a weary-looking woman named Elise Carter, pinched the bridge of her nose like someone at the end of a very long customer service call. She had dealt with galactic bureaucracy before, but this was a new level of stupid. With all due respect, High Arbiter, she said, voice tight with forced diplomacy, playing is not a crime. Zilvatak's gills flared. Ah, but it is. These creatures were observed running, laughing, engaging in unpredictable behavior. One even. It turned several eyes toward the curly-haired girl, who did not look remotely remorseful, attempted to climb a revered statue of Supreme Chancellor Blorgrath the Unyielding. Elise sighed. It was a jungle gym. It was a monument to galactic unity. It had monkey bars. The accused also, Zilvatak continued, ignoring her, engaged in an act of war against the esteemed Grumbolian delegation. Elise frowned. That one was new. What act of war? A bloated, slug-like alien slithered forward, its gelatinous form leaving a trail of iridescent mucus. One of them touched me. The entire room gasped. Elise turned to the accused, who were looking appropriately guilty. The freckled boy raised his hand hesitantly. I think I just gave him a high five. The Grumbolian shuddered, its many chins wobbling with trauma. I have never been so violated. Elise fought the urge to bang her head against the nearest wall. This is ridiculous. They're children. They meant no harm. The law is the law, Zilvatak declared. Humanity's chaotic nature is well documented. These children, the word was said with the kind of disdain reserved for parasites, are an inherent threat to galactic stability. Elise's diplomatic training failed her. They're kids. They're not genetically engineered war criminals. But humanity is unpredictable. Your species is known for improvisation. You do things simply to see if they can be done. That is dangerous. Elise opened her mouth to argue, but hesitated. She had once seen a group of humans strap rockets to a couch just to see how far it would go. She had also seen a man eat an entire ghost pepper on a dare, knowing full well it might kill him. The council might have a point. Still, killing children? That's your solution? Zilvatak's many eyes blinked out of sync. A necessary measure. A massive screen flickered to life above the chamber, transmitting the trial to every corner of the known galaxy. Billions were watching. The children began to cry, realizing, too late, that this was real. Elise stepped forward, fury rising in her chest. You broadcast this as if it's entertainment. Correction, the High Arbiter said smoothly. It is a demonstration. Then the execution began. The method was almost poetic in its cruelty, silent, cold, efficient. A pulse of energy, colorless and swift, disintegrated the first child. No scream. No time for fear. One moment there, the next gone. The freckled boy. The chocolate bar hit the ground with a soft crinkle. The universe held its breath. A second pulse. Another child vanished. Elise could hear her own heartbeat hammering in her skull. She wanted to move, to scream, to do something, but her body refused. The galaxy watched, and the galaxy did nothing. By the time the last child was erased, the chamber was silent. The High Arbiter turned back to Elise. "Let this be a lesson," it said, not unkindly. "Humanity must learn its place." The screen cut to black. The broadcast ended. But back on Earth, the rage had only just begun. In the quiet of a war room buried beneath the surface, a general set down his coffee with careful precision. Across the table, another tapped a file labeled Project Fenrir. The room hummed with restrained violence, with decisions that would reshape the galaxy. Elise Carter sat among them, hands clenched into fists. Her voice was steel, cold, and sharp. "For every child taken," she said, "a world will burn." The Galactic Council had made a critical mistake. Killing human children had been their grand display of power, their declaration that Earth would bow or break. What they had not considered, what their extensive intelligence reports had failed to grasp, was that humanity did not simply endure loss. It metabolized it into something dangerous. It wasn't long before the first strike came. It wasn't a fleet of warships or a planet-killing superweapon. It was a single unmarked ship that slipped through the defenses of Velmora Prime, a core world of the Galactic Council. It landed quietly in the dead of night, barely a blip on planetary sensors. Security forces responded with the casual disinterest of bureaucrats dealing with what was statistically probably some drunk merchant pilot landing in the wrong district. They were wrong. The first squad of Velmoran enforcers arrived at the landing site, weapons drawn, armored in reflective polymer plating that could withstand the average plasma rifle. They expected smugglers or, at worst, a political dissident. They were wholly unprepared for the door to the ship hissing open and a 7-foot nightmare stepping out. The creature had the rough outline of a man, but the similarities ended there. Its frame was too broad, its limbs corded with muscle in ways that biology had no right to allow. Its eyes glowed an unnatural gold in the dim light, its mouth stretching into a snarl that revealed teeth meant for rending flesh from bone. Fur rippled across its arms and shoulders, dark as midnight, and its hands ended in claws that gleamed like knives. For a single, frozen moment, the enforcers simply stared. Then the werewolf moved. It was fast, faster than anything that size should have been. Before the enforcers could fire, it was among them, slashing through armor like it was made of wet paper. Screams rang out, brief and panicked, before cutting off in wet gurgles. Blood painted the landing pad in violent arcs. Back in the Council's security hub, an officer watched the footage and promptly choked on his caffeinated algae drink. "What in the celestial void is that?" he spluttered. His superior, a bored-looking silicon with too many eye stalks and too few survival instincts, peered at the screen. The werewolf had just finished decapitating the last enforcer with a casual swipe. It turned toward the security camera, locked eyes with it, and grinned. The silicon squinted. Appears to be some sort of hairy human." The officer stared at him. "Hairy human? That thing just ripped through a security squad like a rabid war beast." Yes, yes, very dramatic," the silicon said, waving a dismissive appendage. "Send a heavier squad. Then, maybe a drone strike. This is hardly worth." The feed cut out. Across Velmora Prime, it happened again and again. Outposts fell silent. High-ranking officials vanished from their beds, their security detail slaughtered in seconds. By the time the planetary governor realized something was wrong, half the capital was already drenched in blood. The humans had sent monsters. Back on Earth, General Sloan watched the chaos unfold from the comfort of a classified underground bunker. The feeds from hidden cameras, hacked security drones, and reports from the field painted a beautiful picture of havoc. He leaned back in his chair, sipping from a mug that read World's Best Dad in suspiciously pristine condition, given his job description. A younger officer stood beside him, pale and stiff. "Sir, is this ethical?" Sloan gave him a sidelong glance. "Son, you saw what they did. You saw those kids." "I know," the officer said, swallowing hard. "But we're turning our soldiers into—" "They volunteered." Sloan's voice was flat. "Every single one of them. And you tell me, who's going to stop them? Who's going to stop us?" The officer had no answer. Back on Velmora Prime, the planetary governor was barricaded in his personal panic room, shaking as the reports came in. Every emergency measure had failed. The Werewolves had taken down energy shields, obliterated reinforced bunkers, and moved through the city like ghosts with claws. The governor's personal guard, a small army of elite mercenaries, was nothing more than a crimson smear on the marble floors of his estate. He fumbled with the hollow communicator, frantically inputting the frequency of the Galactic Council's emergency line. When the connection finally established, he nearly sobbed in relief. "This is Governor Valar of Velmora Prime," he gasped. "We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack. It's the humans. They sent—" He hesitated, struggling to find the words. "They sent something else?" A figure flickered into view on the other end of the line. High Arbiter Zilvatak regarded him with a vaguely irritated expression. "Yes, we're aware of the situation." The governor stared, incredulous. "You're aware?" Zilvatak gestured vaguely. "Oh yes, it's been quite the spectacle across the networks. Your capital is currently trending at #1 in the entertainment feeds. It's being labeled the Night of the Beastmen. Catchy title." The governor let out an incoherent shriek. "Asterisk, do something." "Asterisk." Zilvatak sighed, rubbing its temples. "Governor, calm yourself. Humanity is making a statement. That much is clear. But we are the Galactic Council. We do not simply roll over because some terrestrial mammals have decided to play monster." The governor barely heard him. Something was scratching at the panic room door. Across the galaxy, on world after world, the Werewolves tore through the Council's forces like wildfire. They did not march in formation or issue grand speeches. They struck from the shadows, unleashed fury and vengeance in its purest form, and left no survivors. Then, as quickly as they had come, they vanished. It took 3 full days before the full extent of the carnage was understood. And on the 4th day, a message was broadcast across the galactic network. The screen flickered to life, showing the inside of an Earth warship. General Sloan stood before the camera, arms crossed. Behind him, several werewolves lounged casually, some cleaning their claws, others gnawing on what were probably alien bones. Sloan smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Ladies and gentlemen of the Galactic Council," he drawled. "We heard your message loud and clear. You thought you could slaughter our children and get away with it." He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping into something colder. "Hungrier. You forgot what happens when you back a predator into a corner." The camera zoomed in on one of the werewolves, 7 feet of fur, muscle, and murder, who tilted its head and bared its fangs. Then very deliberately it whispered, "Run." The transmission cut out. The galaxy had been warned. The Galactic Council had spent centuries building its empire on the assumption that it was untouchable. It controlled trade, law, and war with the smug certainty of an aristocrat lecturing peasants about hard work. It had crushed countless rebellions, silenced dissent with overwhelming force, and prided itself on its ability to snuff out threats before they became problems. Then came the Werewolves. The first full-scale assault was surgical in its brutality. The planet Drelther 9, a fortified core world of the Council, fell in less than a day. There had been no drawn-out siege, no noble last stand, just a transmission failure, followed by eerie silence. When reinforcements arrived, they found the capital eerily intact, except for the red smears that had once been its ruling elite. The phrase for the children had been clawed into the walls of the high chamber. No bodies were recovered. It was only the beginning. The Council responded with panic. Armies were deployed, defenses bolstered, emergency meetings held. Bureaucrats stammered through press conferences, assuring the galaxy that the feral human aberrations would be dealt with in due time. It might have been convincing, if not for the fact that every night another council world went dark. High Arbiter Zilvatak had not slept in 6 cycles. Sleep required the absence of stress, and currently, the only thing absent was good news. His office smelled of burnt circuitry and the nervous sweat of too many advisors, all of whom seemed increasingly unsure whether they worked for the galaxy's supreme ruling body or its largest funeral planning committee. A trembling aide slithered forward, clutching a data slate. High Arbiter, the humans. I know about the humans, Zilvatak snapped, rubbing his temple. Unless they've all spontaneously combusted, I don't want to hear it. The aide swallowed. They're here. Zilvatak frowned. On the planet? The aide shook its head. No, here. A heavy boom echoed through the halls. Another. Then another. Zilvatak's gills flared. How did they breach planetary defenses? An explosion interrupted any further discussion. The walls trembled. Somewhere, an automated voice was calmly advising people to evacuate if they wished to continue existing. The door burst open, and a massive, furred figure strode in. Blood dripped from its claws, its golden eyes scanning the room with the slow, predatory focus of something that had already decided who it was killing first, but was willing to savor the process. Zilvatak, the werewolf, rumbled. Its voice was deep, edged with amusement, like it had been waiting a very long time for this conversation. We need to talk. Zilvatak did what any sensible being in his position would do. He turned and ran. He almost made it. The werewolf moved like lightning, seizing him by the collar and hoisting him into the air like an unruly kitten. Zilvatak's many limbs flailed uselessly. We can negotiate, he wheezed. Negotiate? The werewolf's fangs gleamed. You murdered children on a live broadcast, and now you want to negotiate? Zilvatak was not a proud being. He had survived decades of political backstabbing through strategic cowardice and an exceptional talent for groveling. He activated both immediately. I was following protocol. We didn't realize that you were making a mistake? The werewolf grinned. Yeah, you're realizing it now. Across the Council's core world, the invasion unfolded like a particularly cathartic revenge fantasy. The werewolves did not behave like an ordinary army. They did not engage in prolonged battles, nor did they bother with traditional warfare. They hunted. They infiltrated. They spread through the city like a whispered nightmare, leaving only empty halls and the occasional ominous smear of red. The remaining council leaders barricaded themselves in their grand chamber, a fortress of bureaucracy and arrogance. The doors were 6 feet of reinforced metal. The werewolves tore through them in under a minute. A dozen alien dignitaries scrambled back, tripping over their ceremonial robes. One particularly optimistic official raised a hand in a placating gesture. Now let's all remain calm. A werewolf's growl cut him off. No. The officials glanced at each other, then collectively decided that calm had been a bad idea anyway, and resumed panicking. General Sloan strode in behind the werewolves, hands clasped behind his back. His expression was one of mild disapproval, like a teacher surveying a particularly disappointing test score. Well, he said, this is awkward. Zilvatak, still dangling in the air, managed to strangled. Well, what do you want? Sloan smiled, slow and sharp. Oh, you know what we want. The werewolves moved in. The dignitaries tried to flee, but there was nowhere left to go. Some begged, some fought, some simply stood frozen, too proud or too foolish to comprehend that their rule had ended the moment the first child had died. The broadcast went live across the galaxy, just as the executions began. It was poetic. The council had believed in demonstrations of power. Now, it was their screams that echoed across the stars. The humans had delivered their message. The galaxy had heard it loud and clear. When the last council member had fallen, the werewolves howled. It was a raw, primal sound, one that sent shivers through every sentient species that heard it. It was not the sound of victory. It was a promise. The Galactic Council was no more. 2 weeks later, Elise Carter stood on the bridge of Earth's flagship, looking out at the stars. The war was over. Humanity had not just survived, it had ascended. A transmission came through from one of the surviving species. A nervous, scaled diplomat bowed deeply. We welcome our new human allies and seek peaceful relations. Elise sipped her coffee. Smart. The diplomat hesitated. And, the werewolves? Elise glanced over her shoulder. A group of them lounged nearby, playing a very competitive game of poker. One looked up, flashed a toothy grin, and cracked his knuckles meaningfully. Elise smiled. They're watching,